The Night Flier is an interesting take on the vampire mythos. Why a vampire would need to fly an airplane, I don't know. You could just turn into a bat. But I guess you could cover more ground in a plane, and thus drink more blood. It opens up with a guy on the radio telling a small plane to move off the runway.
Why do all the weird ones have to fly at night?
When it doesn't, he goes out to have a look. And big mistake, because the Count from Sesame Street attacks.
That's lunch.
Sometime later, we're at a news station for the Inside View, a macabre magazine similar to Weekly World News. Remember that one? I used to love looking at the covers when I was a kid. Anyway, we meet reporter Richard Dees.
These nuts. Got him!
He's a real big jerk, acting like he owns the place and yelling at everyone, including his boss.
Just because you don't have any balls doesn't mean you can cut mine off.
But his papers sell, so they keep him on the staff. We also meet Catherine, a new hire, which Dees nicknames Jimmy, because she reminds him of Jimmy Olsen.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison, for everything.
Richard's boss, Merton, offers him a new lead on a hot story, one that will guarantee him the front page. A man's flying around, going to small airports, and drinking the blood of his victims. He goes by the name Dwight Renfield, Renfield being Dracula's follower, and Dwight because he's played by Dwight Fry. A cool little connection. As great as this story sounds, for some reason, Dees doesn't want to work it, so it's passed on to Catherine, the new girl. She has some sort of admiration for Richard, and she follows him to a bar. They get to talking, and although he isn't very pleasant with her, he still offers Catherine some advice.
Never believe what you publish. And never publish what you believe.
He also brings up an old reporter named Dottie, who lost it. He said that when you do this job, it eats away at you. Seeing all the weirdos and psychopaths of the world wears on your soul. And eventually she shot herself.
After talking to these crazy people all day, every single day, sometimes their stories can get to you. And pretty soon, all the starts making sense.
She thinks that her and Dees could be friends. But no, that's not happening.
Let me ask you a question. What the do you think you know about being a real reporter, huh?
The next day, Merton tells Richard that Renfield strikes again, and that Catherine was able to dig up some really good stuff. Now, Richard's interested in the story, and he takes it from her, which obviously doesn't sit well with Catherine. But he's got seniority, so he gets the story. The first person he talks to is Mr. Hannon, who works at the runway we saw in the beginning. He tells his story about how at night he was getting ready to leave, a black plane flew in, and in the morning when he came back to work, he saw Claire, the night shift worker, washing this guy's plane. And in general, he was just acting really strange, almost in a trance, working for this guy, doing whatever Renfield asks. One other odd detail here is that there was a huge pile of dirt under the plane, full of worms and maggots. I like this guy. He's got a great voice.
You're going after him, ain't you? You best be careful, Hoss.
Anyway, Claire goes home for the day, gets some sleep, comes back to his night shift, and the vampire attacks, draining him of his blood. Richard visits him in the graveyard. He puts some dead flowers on his grave and kicks his tombstone over. What a likable guy. Remember, he's our hero of the story, folks. Anyway, he cuts his finger and bleeds on the grave, thinking that Claire's a vampire now? I'm not really sure about that one. But he's interrupted by the gravedigger kicking him out.
Scare the shit, buddy.
That night, Richard gets a visitor. But it was only a dream. Or was it? He flies from airport to airport following the blood trail left by Renfield, who's always just one step ahead. He does pay off a guy in New York to see the bodies, and he notices puncture holes in the neck, but not tiny ones like you would expect to see in a vampire movie. He's got some heft to him. During all this, Dees reports back to his boss, who tells him to wrap things up and get the story out. But Richard knows this is going to get weirder, and he refuses to rush it. Merton sees that Catherine's working late, and despite being kicked off the story, she's still doing research on Renfield. Her boss likes her attitude and asks Catherine to do her own story on Renfield while Richard does his.
Bring me the Night Flier. The byline's yours.
The next set of murders is a couple. The locals say something was off about them. Renfield landed, tranced both of them, and stayed in their house for a couple of days. Ellen here got all dolled up like a young schoolgirl for her new guest. Right before he tore him to shreds, that is. When Richard returns to his hotel after a long day of reporting, he sees that his arch nemesis is there, Catherine. Obviously, he's not happy to see her, but after arguing for a bit, Richard decides to actually team up so they can cover more ground. Surprised to see such a change in heart, Catherine agrees and they get to it right away, calling airports all over the U.S. No one's heard or seen Renfield until they get to the very last one, Wilmington, North Carolina. When they call it, the guy on the other end is actually really helpful. That is, until they ask about Renfield, where he says,
No.
Obviously lying. Catherine starts packing her bags right away to leave, and when she comes back to Richard's room, it looks like he left without her. But nope, just hiding out, waiting to kidnap Catherine and lock her in the closet. Gee whiz, I get that he wants full credit for the story, but you don't have to resort to this. It's like they said earlier on, this job gets to you. It makes you crazy. Richard flies into Wilmington, but he's too late, and Renfield just took out his biggest airport yet. There's bodies all over the place, drained of blood. The sight is just a little too much for even Richard to handle, and he runs to the bathroom to throw up. And in there, he has his first encounter with Dwight Renfield. The effect here is actually pretty cool. You can't see him in the mirror, of course, and he takes a leak. Do vampires pee? I guess so. He smashes the mirrors as he goes and stands right behind Richard, who doesn't dare turn around. The vampire makes him take out his film, ruining it and his story. No one would believe it anyway. Renfield tells him that they have a lot in common, and he doesn't want to kill him. He's full now anyway. After Richard cleans the poop running down his leg, he confronts the beast one last time.
I need to see your face!
And the monster obliges. What can I say? He's ugly. But seeing his face is gonna cost him, and Dwight makes Richard drink his blood, which puts him into a trance. Everything is black and white and foggy like a dream. All the people who are laying dead on the airport floor rise up like zombies. Dee's only chance is to get to an emergency axe and hack his way out of here. And that's exactly what he does. But in reality, he's chopping up the already dead bodies, and the cops walk in to see his crime. Who tipped him off? Why, Catherine, of course. Richard sees that he's been betrayed, and he goes into attack mode. But the police shoot him dead before he can cause any damage. I was kind of wondering at this point if they were going to leave it open-ended like this. Was it really Renfield killing people, or was it Richard the whole time? But for better or for worse, Catherine does see Renfield in his human form board his plane and take off. So it would seem he's the murderer all along. Even so, that's not what Catherine writes about. Remember, never believe what you publish, and never publish what you believe. What did you think of the Night Flier? Honestly, I thought it was pretty darn good. I've never seen a horror movie that revolves around airplanes and vampires, but it puts a whole new spin on the legend. I really liked Richard's dream scene. It was actually pretty scary at times. The black and white with all the fog and zombies. But in the end, I was happy to see that Catherine called the cops. If not, just to capture Richard in the act or not. But I think it's a good idea if you know a killer's at an airport You should probably call the local police. Yes, I think Richard is unlikable, but in the end he's supposed to be. And you're left rooting for Catherine. Like I said, I would almost have rather them left the end part out, where you see Renfield fly away. That way, you might think Richard was it all along. But I guess they planned on doing a sequel that would follow Catherine and go into Renfield's past a little bit. I would have liked to have seen that, but when the Night Flier flopped, the sequel was canned pretty quickly. I like the Night Flier. It's not perfect, but I think it deserves at least one watch through. I give it 3 ugly Renfields out of 4.
This guy's either got teeth the size of Bigfoot or he's running railroad spikes into their necks.
I mean, the fatties in the supermarket lines are gonna love this guy. God, I hope he kills more people.